Hello. So I'm going to step you through a few of the issues I've encountered with my Uniformation GK2. I got the unit at the beginning of February. It's now February 29th. I've had some successful prints, but recently I had a number of unsuccessful prints, and in troubleshooting those, I encountered issues with the installation of the nFEP and some of the screws missing, the build plate having stripped screws on the interior screw set, the 4 interior screws, when going to tighten those up, which I'll show you in other videos. This first video, though, not just being an introduction, I want to show you one of the first issues I bumped into, which I think is actually resulting in some of the problems that people are having. I certainly had it with the mounting clips, especially the 2 rear mounting clips on the resin vat being broken or them breaking consistently. So those specific clips I'll show you here. I just cleaned this vat. So there's one of the clips there, kind of in focus. Another clip here, until I've washed this vat because the quality stickers, QC stickers, starting to wear off. Another clip there, and another clip there. So obviously to set this in, you set the tray about 2/3 of the way in, you push it forward until it clicks, great. So when the unit arrives in the box, it has this resin vat cover or lid in the packaging, which you can tell already is snug and it's not really fitting in. It takes some energy to get that on there, but when it's on there, you can take it out and, you know, it's a fixed. It's not going to fall off unless you have resin in there, but it's in there. I think the tolerance levels, specifically here on the sides where there's this little flange, my fingernail's going across it, there and here, are too tight. Let me show you why. Again, this is how you get the printer when it comes out of the box, but there's obviously styrofoam and build plate up here. What happens here is right there. So the inside of the green here is, of the closing lid, is catching against the corner of this resin vat lid. So, and it's catching on both sides. So what happened, and I'll have to force this out to kind of show you, but what happened is when I got the unit, it's like this, and you know, it says to unpack and all that stuff. So you go to lift this thing out, and what ends up happening is as you pull this forward, that tray, you can see the tray now is moving. And the lid, as you pull it forward, the lid pulls the tray, the resin vat, forward and upward, which causes those 2 rear clips to get lodged and break. I only realized this after I broke them because I hadn't ever unpacked one of these units before. So I'm going to put my phone here for a second and I'll show you what I had to do. So let me show you what I had to do here to get this apologies for the phone. What I had to do when unpacking to get this actually to unpack so it would stop doing that. I basically had to get my fingers in here on the sides, open up the green side by basically yanking it outward, open that up and lift this up. But you can see this, the tray is still coming. So that immediately caused, and you can see basically now, here's the tray and it's been pulled out and upward. The lid is now loose and that caused those rear clips to snap. So that was one of the first things that happened. The other thing that happened, unfortunately, is the first time I actually went to use this, and I sealed it up for the night because I'm here in my garage, is that I had the tray down, I put the lid down, there was resin in the vat, you know, come down, open the tray, open this thing, tray comes forward, had forgotten to put my fingers in there to hold it, tray goes like this and dumps resin everywhere. That was my first having to clean everything experience, and why this QC sticker is all wet, because I basically had resin dump all over my station here. Thank goodness I had this silicone mat. But that was 100% not fun. And all that due to the tolerance levels of the flanging on a part that probably cost 2 cents to make. So my recommendation, correct the tolerance levels on that, on this, this lid, or just frankly, don't include it. And definitely do QC on these to make sure when you close these lids at manufacturing time that they're not rubbing up against that lid. Other thing, these clips, I appreciate that they sent some spare ones. As I said, I had to use the spare ones before I even used the printer, the very first day, to replace these because they snapped. Now I'm glad that these clips are actually replaceable using just an Allen head wrench or Allen wrench screws. But I would highly suggest that this resin vat is a combination of metal and plastic. I would look at using aluminum or some other metal or alloy to secure these spring-loaded clips in. I believe that this is actually the screen itself has a bezel that's metal as well, that holds this in. So I would definitely improve these. Somebody pointed out, oh, well, you can just 3D print replacement clips. Yeah, but if you break your replacement clips, how are you going to 3D print new ones? If you're all out of clips, so that's no fun. So that's the first thing I would suggest. The next thing I'll suggest, I'll actually have to take the nFEP off again here. I replaced, as part of my diagnostic of figuring out what's wrong with this printer, I had to take the nFEP off and replace it with the spare. But while I'm here, I'll show you on this side the problem I'm going to show you in the next video. The nFEP is obviously, this metal bracket is very, very taut and tight because you're basically looking at a drum head there. And it has these screws, 20 or so of them that go around that keep this thing tight, and that's great. However, there you can see the threading spots for these 6 screws. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. 2 on the sides, 1 on each top and bottom. Those threading spots are for, I believe, some 3x3 hex screws or some M3 by 3 millimeter hex screws. Those screws weren't included. And I think that not only weren't they included, now it makes a little bit more sense to me as to why I have a spare Allen head wrench in the toolkit that comes with the unit. Because I believe that wrench is designed for these screws, and I was trying to figure out why I didn't have any screws for one of the wrenches that came with the tool set. So I'm going to take this thing inside. I'm going to take all these screws off the nFEP, hopefully not screw it up in doing so. And I'll show you where these screws should be and how they're missing here. So that'll be in the next video. All right, in this video, I'm going to go over the build plate leveling screw issue that I've seen with the interior screws. The build plate, if you recall, has 4 exterior screws, or they call them, I guess, outer screws, duh. And then inside these recessed holes, there are 4 internal screws. And basically the process being here is that you loosen these outer screws counterclockwise. You actually tighten these inner screws clockwise to relieve the tension on the plate, such that the plate will then bounce up and down and be loose. Then you hand tighten the outer screws, not over tighten, and then you tighten by unscrewing, by counterclockwise screwing the inner screws. And the inner screws, as a result, push up against the top of the plate, push down against the bottom of the plate, and basically secure the plate in its level position. So I'm going to start lowering this thing while I'm talking here, and I will get I will risk life and limb here to get these test area strips. I'll just do the front 2. Well, here, I'll do all 4. I had to make a spare one here. So I will get the test area strips here. Again, going from the instructions I found online for the unit itself. And so there we go. So lowering that, and while that's lowering, I'll show you here. I believe this tool came with the unit. I also have this Elegoo 2-in-1 rinse and cure station. And these are the Allen head wrenches that came with all of these things. These are actually the clips, the two rear clips that were broken as a result of the video I showed earlier with the clip having a problem. Here's a piece of the broken clips that popped off. Going to go like that and snapped off. So, and you ain't gluing that back on. If you do, you're not going to get any tension. When I emailed customer support, apologies, getting over a cold here. When I emailed customer support telling them I was missing screws from the nFEP and I quoted the silver ones, they said, but no, we gave you spare screws. And I said, yeah, you gave me 5 of the 20 or so screws that secure the bracket down in place, the nFEP bracket. But the 6 screws that are the M3x3s, you're missing. And again, in my other video, I've shown those screws that are specifically missing from those. So I have spares of this, and that's great. I appreciate those in case those get threaded or whatever. And that's all great. But the 6 screws on there don't work. So going back to the build plate, hopefully, man, I did some test prints overnight, so this better still be tight. So these are tight. This guy back here is still tight. And this guy back here is still tight. Now, much to my chagrin, I'm going to throw this thing out of level to demonstrate the point here. So I believe it's this one here in the front. So I'm going to loosen this front screw, the outer front. Okay, so I've given it 2 turns there. And then on the inside here, I'm going to tighten. So going, this direction so people can see, taking the tension off, as you would expect, completely. So now, this strip, well, it's still tight because it's secured down, but now if I raise this fella up, we'll do 100 millimeters, and hopefully you can see the actual bouncing motion of the build plate. Well, you can see a little bit there that it's flexing now. I suppose if I keep screwing it or tightening this here, you'll see it more. Again, going clockwise on this one, counterclockwise on this one. I might have to do all of them. I really hate doing that. Now I just got this thing leveled. But anyhow, what I want to show you here is the problem and the threaded screw, and hopefully you can hear the screw actually pop while it's threading when I go to tighten up that inner screw. Alright, so lowering back down, test strips in place, that's all great. Oh, now it's really lowering down after it's found bottom. Okay, now it's in place. Okay, so now, following their directions, the outer screw, tighten clockwise, hand tighten. Okay, there we go, just a 1/4 pass tight. The internal screw here, you go counterclockwise on this. Counterclockwise, counterclockwise, counterclockwise. I'm threading this thing right. There we go. All right, so now I've got tension on it. The directions say to go a 1/2 turn. So let's see if the mic picks the sound up of the threading happening. Did you hear that? You see how it basically had tension and it stopped, not even 1/2 turn through. So now we're back again. Tension, tension, tension. And starting to spin and loose again. That is a stripped screw. So what I've done here to get my test prints working overnight is I've tightened this thing a 1/4 turn over here. This one's still tight, all the rest are tight. I did actually get some successful prints as a result of this, using the old cones of calibration with some Soraya Tech Tenacious gray. So that's pretty happy. These are still drying from their alcohol bath, but feeling pretty good about these. But I don't like the fact that one of the screws there is stripped. Obviously, if I go to one of the other screws here and put tension on it, these are tight. They're not giving it all. They're not going to continue to rotate. These other 3 screws on the interior are all tight, and I really can't put any more torque on them, or they might strip. But this one here, from the very first time I put any sort of tension on that one, it'll basically go a quarter of a turn. It just did it again there. It'll go a quarter of a turn and I can feel it, and then if I go anymore, it's going to strip completely. So that's the problem with the bed leveling. Again, I think I've gotten it working here with the test strips, but nonetheless, for a unit that's not even a month old, having a build plate with one of the screws, the leveling screws shot, eventually it's going to come back to haunt me when I have to re-level this thing. So it is what it is there with that, and that's one of these things I hope that you know, I can get replaced with this unit, given it's well under warranty and it's only a month old. So all right, so the final video I'll show you here is taking the nFEP off all million screws of that, and then showing you the screws and the recesses for the screws that are missing, that I keep talking about, the 6 silver screws that are missing. So that video will be in just a minute here after I get that thing taken off. So talk soon. All right, so here's my workstation. Here's the resin vat for the unit. I'm unscrewing, hopefully, the last of the 20, so there's 12, 24, 30 screws, 30 screws that hold this thing in position. So there they are. This is the replacement nFEP. Hopefully I don't have to replace it again as a result of taking this thing off again, but we do what we do for science. One moment, I'm gonna have to put the phone down here to, I will set it here while I try to get this lid off. Come on, come on. Sorry, I am not a YouTuber, influencer, just a dude with a phone and a 3D printer. Oh, sorry. When replacing the nFEP also, you gotta take off the rear clips. Don't try to do it without doing that first. You're gonna have, as they say, a bad time if you do. So, just unscrewing these 2 rear clips off this thing. Oops. Let's not mix these up here. That and that. All right. Who's the guy that said, screw it, we'll do it live? Yeah. True that. All right. The clips are off. I'm going to take the nFEP bracket off, which obviously is under tension because it's bent upward. So, cool. All right. There it is. And hopefully it'll stay. I'll put this gasket back on when it's done. So, all right. Here's the nFEP with the bracket still attached. I'm going to keep it like that so I can get this thing back on without any issues, hopefully. So, if you look here on the resin vat, if you look here on the resin vat, for those 6 screws I tell you, well, the screws aren't there, they're on this other piece, but I'll show you in a second. There are recesses for these screws. 1 here, 2, these are the threads for the FEP screws that hold the bracket in place, that go through the gasket and the FEP itself. But this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those are recesses where the screw heads would be. Now the screw heads I'm talking about, if this thing would normally be downward like this, if it would be downward like this, those screw heads, if you look here on the unit, would be here. No screw, no screw, no screws, no screw, no screw, no screw. Those are the 6 screws that I keep citing. They are threaded holes that should be there. I believe their purpose is that what you do is you put the FEP down first, the nFEP sheet down first, then you would screw these screws into place, these 6 screws to hold the sheet down. Then you would basically come down, flip it over, and then you'd mount it downward. So that would hold the FEP in place while you were able to screw the tension plate, the torsion plate down. I was able to get it tense enough down by basically not puncturing holes through these and just letting the force of the the raised, I guess, screw threading there, whatever you want to call it, by letting the force of that pull the plastic taut on each side, and at the top and bottom, you can see it's pretty taut here, into those holes to hold the FEP in place while I screwed in those 30 other screws. So those are the 6 screws. I believe the gentleman I was exchanging DMs with in support said they are M3 by 3mm hex screws. But those are the 6 silver screws that, again, should be present that are not. So I'm going to put this thing back together now and run a lot more calibration tests, and hopefully it works. So hopefully that's the issues with the resin vat cover, the build plate, the missing screws, and the vat clips. So I'm trying to remember if there's anything else. Anyhow, if there is, I'll put another video. Thanks. All right, wrapping up here. nFEP is back on, 30 screws later. Thank you for sending a screwdriver in addition to an Allen wrench to do that, much easier. Again, don't want this to come off as some sort of hit piece or anything. I'm not a reviewer. I bought the unit with my own money. You know, I'm doing 3D print and paint here in my home as a hobby. And I got the product because I live in a cold climate, and the heater and the resolution were all big deals for me. And I was able to get some successful prints here and things I painted. So these were at 0.03 millimeter using frozen 8K. This one, so the prints, you know, when it worked, the prints were quite good quality. And as you can see, I did get good yields off the prints. Yeah, sometime thereafter, either as a result of, I think as a result largely of the build plate not being able to get enough tension downward during the leveling process, I was starting to get failure after failure after failure, and I changed out the FEP, looked at the build plate, did a lot of re-leveling. Changing out the FEP and tightening up the build plate like I have done seems to have worked for the very short cones of calibration, or the Resin XP2 calibration matrix, but those are only maybe 20 millimeters high. If I want to print something like this that is, you know, close to, you know, 3 inches tall, it just won't do it. And I've had so many failed prints anytime I try to print anything very high. So I thought it might be the FEP not having enough tension, perhaps. I don't think those screws, I think these screws are enough to hold it in place. I think those screws, frankly, are just there. Those 6 screws are probably there just to make installation easier, or reinstallation easier. But I think that a combination of the build plate not being level was probably the biggest issue for some of my failed prints. So at this point, I'm not using the printer or anything beyond just some calibration things with some Soraya resin to just see if I can get the exposure times and stuff for that resin figured out. So when I get my new build plate, I can start getting to print things that are taller than 20 millimeters. So again, love the unit, think it's great. Want you guys to obviously improve and do better with GK3. And hopefully all of this helps, and I really appreciate you getting back to me on email and on Discord, and hopefully these videos help you guys improve the product. So thank you very much.